Hey everybody, welcome to my reading wrap up for July. Okay, so for the month of July, I had some winners and I had some losers. So I'll start with the first book in the month of July that I began. It was an audio book. I was really excited about it and I ended up DNFing it. So that book was called You Can't Touch My Hair and Other Things I Still Have to Explain. And I have to tell you, I was really excited to hear this book. I thought it would be really funny. And the reason is because when I was teaching, little teaching story. When I was teaching Catcher in the Rye, you know how Holden is always ranting and carrying on and going on and on. He likes to rant. So I assigned a rant. I had my students write a rant. And what a powerful assignment that turned out to be. Students, high school students, had so many things to say, you know, things that really annoy them. And one student, she had this beautiful hair and her rant was about people who assume they could go up and touch her hair. And I told her, I said, I have to confess, I have a desire to touch your hair. Like, there's just something about it that makes me really want to go and touch it. But I never would. It wouldn't even occur to me to violate someone else's personal space like that. Obviously, that's not okay. But I did tell her, I said, you know, it's just so tempting. It's a good thing. There's something about your hair that's so inviting, but no, you cannot touch her hair. And I never did, let the record show. I respect personal space for people. But the book, when I saw that title, I was like, oh, I want to hear this, you know? And I was expecting it to be funny. Apparently the person who did the audiobook was a comedian, but I felt like it was very self-promoting. It was a lot of, you know, this person is really this and that and so great. I guess they were introduced by someone else and I don't like that. But the thing I really didn't like was it was just very crass. There was a lot of stuff in there that I thought was crass. And I know that comedy sometimes gets crass. I don't know why. I don't think that you have to be crass in order to be funny. So I did end up DNFing that book. Another audiobook, though, that I listened to was very good. I really enjoyed that one. And that one was also funny. I was in the mood for a funny audiobook. And that one was called How to Plot a Payback by Melissa Ferguson. And that one, I don't know if that was a Christian book or not. It wasn't openly, it didn't talk about scripture or the word of God, but it was definitely very, very clean. I think I've read another Melissa Ferguson. Hold on, let me check. Okay, she wrote the Cul-de-Sac Wars, which I did read, and I think I reviewed on this channel, and I enjoyed that. Again, very clean fiction. Wouldn't call it Christian. I think it was published as Christian, and that was my biggest complaint because it was clean, but it wasn't really Christian. But this one was the same thing. It was a lot of fun. It was perfectly clean. So How to Plot the Perfect Payback was about this guy named Finn, and he gets this job of his dreams, right? He was writing for a mystery TV show, and he was getting kind of tired of it, and he was offered a job as producer for this rom-com TV show. And I think it was supposed to be Friends, which that's another thing. Like, I watched my share of Friends, but you know, Joey and Chandler, they watch porn. This is not a Christian television show. Anyway, Finn was given this job to write for a regular TV show, a weekly rom-com that seemed an awful lot like Friends to me, but it was called Neighbors. And the lead in the show, her name is Lavender. And Lavender is his nemesis. Like, way back from high school, Lavender was the understudy for his role in a school play. And I guess she caused him to fall and get injured accidentally, totally accidentally. But he didn't get to be the lead. Then she got to be the lead and she got discovered, and therefore she ruined his life because she got discovered and he didn't. And he has this whole list. He really carries around a list of all the reasons that he hates Lavender. Of course, Lavender has no idea. Lavender just goes about her life being Lavender, and she doesn't even really know who Finn is. And then she's like, you look familiar. And she puts it together later in the book. And then she figures out how much he hates her. And, you know, it comes as a surprise to her because she didn't know that she did these things that negatively impacted him. And so she has to deal with that. She looks at that and she's like, wow, maybe I should be a little more considerate, a little more thoughtful. And so she has a little bit of a change in the book, but she's the lead in the show and he is writing the show and he tries to pay back. That's the thing, how to plot the perfect payback. He tries to pay her back for ruining his life by causing trouble for her on the show. Like there's this one scene where he has her dealing with chickens because he read in an interview long ago that she has this odd chicken phobia. So it's just silly, funny little things like that. I sort of was thinking of the birds there, Hitchcock and the birds. He didn't like Tippi Hedren, so he put real birds in that movie. Did you know that? But anyway, so it was just a cute rom-com all about how Finn hates Lavender. Lavender has no clue and she's determined to be his friend, and then she figures it out and the two of them have to make peace with each other. And it was just a fun audiobook. It was a clean rom-com. I recommend it. Behind the Lie. This one has to go back to the library. And so I'm doing this video now because I can't wait to get rid of this book. I DNF'd this book. Didn't like it at all. I thought I would because it was the story of a block party that goes bad. And the main character is a former investigator. I guess she's a former police officer who ends up being an investigator. Anyway, she's an investigator of some sort. And the block party goes bad and her best friend disappears. A car is driven into a neighbor's house. Her best friend's husband, drove the car into the neighbor's house. The neighbor was shot and the best friend disappears and the husband won't say what happened. And so this investigator is determined to get to the truth. And I was really interested in the investigator. And the other thing about the investigator that piqued my interest is she has a teenage son who's very aloof. He doesn't want to confide in her. There's some stuff going on in his life that she wants to find out about. She wants to be a part of her teenager's life and he's shutting her out. And I have a teenager and I've raised a teenager. So I have one teenager who's now a successful accountant. Yay. And I have one teenager who's in high school and I am a high school teacher. So I was all in for the detective trying to relate to her teenager and struggling with, is her teenager somehow embroiled in this mystery? I was really in for that. But the character who disappeared, the best friend, it starts getting into her life and I just couldn't. And I asked a friend of mine who wasn't reading the book. We were just getting together for dinner and I said to her, at what point do you DNF a book? And I told her some of the things that were going on in the book. And she's like, oh yeah, I would have DNF'd it for that. So I don't know. It's just me. This is not a Christian book. It's not even a clean book. I'll tell you. All right, I'll just tell you. So the character is peeking in the neighbor's window and she sees them in a very intimate moment and it kind of describes that. And like, like the peeking, the voyeuristic, or what is that called? Voyeurism, that right there, I'm like, eh. And then the act that was being described and then the voyeuristic reaction to that, no, we're done. Okay, so that one's going back to the library. And you know what? Maybe it's a great book and I'm just a prude. If you're not somebody who has, like Christian ideals about what you should and shouldn't be reading, you might like this book. I mean, I was definitely interested in the investigator, but I can't read a book with somebody peeping in other people's bedroom windows and then getting aroused by that. That's just not something I'm willing to read. So that one is going back to the library today. Now, hopefully you saw my video last week where I talked about my BookTube meetup with my wonderful, beautiful sisters in Christ, Chrissy and Stacy. I went to the beach and on the way home, I met with them and we did some book shopping and we had boba tea and it was great. But I did not in that video tell you about the books on that trip. I was saving that for my monthly wrap up. So while I was on my way to the Outer Banks, I read a story called Just the Nicest Person by Christy Barritt. And that is book 1 of the Crime Junkies series. And I believe it was recommended by Amanda at BookLoverAmanda. And it was a really cute, clean Christian mystery. And that is, I guess the story begins with the podcaster. This guy is doing a podcast on this sweet little woman, just the nicest person. Everyone calls her, the woman in the podcast, when she is mysteriously killed. And the podcaster wants to get to the bottom of that when someone comes into his home while he's recording his podcast and kills him. So it's on like commercial break. And so nobody knows what happened to him, but the podcast abruptly stops. And then there's this character named Andy. Andy Slate, and she is driving her truck. She is a truck driver, but actually she's a former lawyer, and this crook ruined her career and killed someone very dear to her, and she wants to track down this crook and get them, arrested, caught, ruin their lives because they've ruined her law career. So that's really what she's doing, but her current position is truck driver. And her truck ends up stranded on this road the night that the podcaster's killed. And she is out in this snowstorm in Alaska when this guy, Duke McAllister, drives by. Now, Duke is a tour guide, and he's driving along. He's giving a tour to these two people that he's giving a tour to. They're brother and sister. I think they're twins. And one's an influencer. She's really funny. And the other one is like a computer genius. He hacks into computers and things. And they're just on there for the tour. But Duke sees Andy, and he stops to ask if she needs help when these bullets start flying. So Duke rescues Andy, and the two of them, with the brother and sister on the tour, end up at the motel for safety and to stay the night because they're all snowed in. And the person running the motel is really concerned about the podcaster. So she starts telling Duke and Andy that this podcaster that she's been following, and of course Andy and the influencer are following the podcaster too. She's really concerned, and she convinces Duke and Andy to go check on the podcaster. Lo and behold, the podcaster was murdered. And so Duke and Andy go and check because he's nearby, and she had a vehicle they could drive safely. They go check on the guy, and he's murdered. And now the killer is after Duke and Andy. So Duke and Andy are working together to try and figure out what happened. And then the influencer and the brother get involved, and the lady running the hotel gets involved. It's just a really cute, fun mystery. And I hope there are more. It is the first one in a series. I hope those characters return in the other ones because it was just an interesting group of people and a lot of fun. So thank you, Amanda, for recommending that. While I was at the beach, I read Mrs. Buncle's Book Club, and you can tell I spent a lot of time in the pool while I was reading this, and I'm kind of bummed about that because I really love this book, and I'm definitely going to pass it around the women at my church and my friends and share this book because it was just a delight. And this one was recommended by Krista at BooksAndJams a long time ago. I've had it in my possession. Like I've said in other videos, I'm trying to read my way through the books I already own, and I'm really coming along there. So I went and bought some other books as I shared in my last video. But anyway, Mrs. Buncle's Book Club was just adorable. And this is the story of a woman, Mrs. Buncle, who writes this book. And she writes it about the people in her community. And it's just a day-to-day, life is dreary kind of book about the people living in her small town. And when she sends it to the publisher to be published, the publisher thinks it's a satire. And so he publishes it, and it becomes this big hit. And all the people in the small town are reading the book, and they recognize themselves in the book. And so they become really angry, and they want to find out who wrote this book because Mrs. Buncle published it under a man's name. I forget the name of the man, but it was a fictional name, a pen name. And so everyone thinks this man wrote the book, and they're all like determined to find this man and tell him he has to retract all the things he said in his book, and they're vicious lies. And of course, the vicious lies are things like, this person puts pectin in their jelly, and this person wears a wig. And it was just a very fun, small town, old-fashioned book. In fact, I looked at the copyright and it said 212, but then I realized it was reprinted in 212. And the author actually died around the year I was born, like in the early 70s. And so it was written a long time ago, and you can tell, but it was just so sweet and so adorable. And I laughed out loud at times. I really, this was a nice book. It wasn't a mystery. It was cozy, but it wasn't a mystery. It was just a fun book about, people in small towns. It reminded me of that book about the potato peelers, the Potato Pie Peel Society. I'll look and put the title here because a friend of mine recommended it. And so she's definitely getting this book. I'm going to tell her, you're going to love this. Okay, and then the other book I read at the beach, I had to be very gentle with. I couldn't read it in the pool. I was real careful not to get it wet because it's a library book. and that is called The Last Chance Library, and I loved this book. This is definitely a 5-star read, and the best thing about this one is, don't you just love when something is a 5-star read that you didn't know about before? I mean, I just saw it in the library. I was like, oh, it looks pretty good. I grabbed it, knew nothing, went into it blind, and it was delightful. It was so precious. So this is the story of June Jones. And I don't know if she was named June Jones. Probably her mother named her June Jones like the book character, Junie B. Jones, I think. But June Jones is a library's assistant. She works at her local library. And she is grieving the loss of her mother. Her mother's been gone a long time, and she just can't let go of anything that belonged to her mother. So her house is, she lives in her mother's house. She inherited it, and it's just cluttered with all her mother's stuff. And is that harsh to say clutter? I think it is clutter though, because it's of value to the mother, but not necessarily all of it is not necessarily all of value to June. So there's all this stuff in the mother's house that belongs to the mother, and June's living there just surrounded by all her mother's things, and her mother's been gone a long time. And all June wants to do is work in the library, go home, eat frozen lasagna, and hang out with her mother's cat. Even the cat doesn't like June. The cat's mean. I love my cat. But anyway, June's cat is mean and to June. And then there's this neighbor who was dear friends with the mother, and she comes over sometimes and tries to get June to, put herself out there to make some friends, maybe to date somebody, and ultimately to clean out the house and donate some of her mother's things. And June doesn't want to part with anything that belonged to her mother, including the job at the library, because her mother worked at the library, and that's why June works there. So June gave up all of her hopes and aspirations. She had I think a scholarship to Cambridge. She had this great future, and she gave it all up because she wanted to be where her mother was. She helped her mother during her mother's cancer, and she just didn't want to move on after her mother died. So then in the library, the news strikes that the local council people are going to possibly sell the library, I think to an upscale coffee shop. So when the news hits that, the city council is planning to sell the library or possibly shut down the library, all kinds of people band together to protest this. And the characters that group together to try and save this library are a riot. I mean, I laughed out loud several times when I was reading this book, and I cried a little bit too in the book. It had all the feels. And you can sort of see on the cover. So I'm thinking that is probably the cat that didn't like June. This is maybe the little boy. There's a little boy named Jackson who's very precocious and does a lot of reading. And he, of course, wants to save the library, and he speaks up about that. And then there's this very sweet elderly man who gets on the library's computer, but, he's elderly. And so June helps him every day with the computer. And he's incredibly loyal to her and to the library, and just wonderful, wonderful character. And then there's this character named Vera. I don't know which one is Vera, because I think this might be Vera, but then there's another character with a cane too. But Vera is this spitfire. She was really involved in protests in the 60s, and she wants to just, she just comes alive with the idea of a protest. And so she's really funny. If you like a funny old lady, this is one that is just really funny. And then there's this sweet woman who is, she's from another country, and she struggles with the English language, and she comes into the library, and June gives her some help, and she wants to thank June with a cake. And then she comes to the library with her cake sometimes and just becomes welcomed into the fold. And it was just a lovely, lovely book, and I definitely want to recommend this one. It was a 5-star read. So I highly recommend. I loved it. And then the last book that I will tell you about this month was an audiobook that I listened to on my way home from my trip to the beach. It was wonderful, and it was called Up to No Gouda. And that was a really cute mystery. I think it was the first in a new mystery series as well. Let me check. It's book 1 of 4 books so far in the grilled cheese mystery series. And it's the story of Carly, who has this grilled cheese restaurant that she loves, that she's trying to, get up and running. And it's brand new, but it's looking like a success when this guy Lyle comes in. And he was this, sleazebag that she went out with in high school that didn't go well. And now he has bought the location where she's leasing her grilled cheese restaurant. And he has bought the grilled cheese restaurant, and he's going to kick her out and put in his girlfriend. And I forget her name. It was something like Cookie or Tiffany. I think her name was Tiffany. And he is going to give the shop to Tiffany, and she's going to run a clothing boutique. And, the people that work in the grilled cheese restaurant one in particular becomes very angry and cusses him out. And then, it's a Christian book, so it's not really cusses him out, but she has a few words to say to him. And so anyway, Lyle ends up murdered, and it's right outside the grilled cheese restaurant. And so Carly calls the police, and then there's this cute little dog, the dog on the cover. She finds the dog at the murder scene and starts to really care about the dog. That's why he's on the cover. I had hoped that he would be a bigger character in the story, though, because, I like those cat mysteries, and usually the cat has a role in catching the bad guy. I thought she could have done more with the dog, but she names the dog Havarti, and Havarti, she gives Havarti to the local vet, and the vet chips him and gives him gives him like a flea bath and all this. And so he was a cute little character, but really the story was about Carly trying to figure out who killed Lyle. And there were some different people, of course, in the mystery. The waitress from the grilled cheese shop was a prime suspect, and Carly wants to clear her name because they're friends and they work in the grilled cheese restaurant together. And so she's trying to clear her name, and she goes about investigating the murder. And as she's doing that, she reconnects with her high school friend, and I love those scenes. I love a book with friends. I was telling my friend, because she said, well, you're my girlfriend, but not really my girlfriend. I said, yeah, I used to listen to a YouTuber that would say friend girl, my friend girl. And so Carly reconnects with her friend girl, Gina, and I love that the best. I love books with good friendships. And so it was just a really fun, cozy mystery where there's just a lot of nice people in a community working together to solve a crime. So that was fun, and I will end there. Of course, July is not over, but I have to get these books to the library, so I'm going to go ahead and do my video a little bit early. But the good news is I'll have more books to talk about for you next month. Bye for now.